For the agent that must be in the know, Medicare Industry Insider discusses critical insight, noteworthy trends, and upcoming issues in the Medicare market.
Deciphering and debating the legislation, regulation, and what's happening in the market. I'm Chalen Jackson.
And I'm Rachel Bremeyer, and we're going to talk shop, dive deep into these complex topics, and make them understandable and actionable.
If you've ever wondered where the world of Medicare is going and how to prepare for the future, Medicare Industry Insider is the resource you've been looking for.
Welcome to Medicare Industry Insider. I'm Rachel Bremeyer.
And I'm Chalen Jackson.
And today we are going to dive deep into what is the purpose of an agent and an FMO. We have gone back in time a little bit, so we'll talk historically, briefly on just what that means, like what did an agent, what did an FMO, what was the purpose, what did that actually mean, and then we'll dive back into present time. And this is a little different episode. We're going to go into a lot of different quotes from people who are either FMO owners, or our agents. We've got client quotes. So we'll dive a little bit deeper into what that actually means. But first and foremost, we'll talk about the history of what it means to be an FMO and an agent.
Absolutely, Rachel. I think this is a really timely and great reminder as we're seeing a lot of clients. We just wrapped up or are wrapping up AEP. Great time to be thankful for those clients and think about as you're planning for the following year, how you can continue to provide value and demonstrate why folks work with you. So I think this conversation is very timely and just a good reminder to folks about how they can better express that value proposition they bring to the table to their clients, how they can be getting as much value as possible out of their FMO or upline, and then kind of what that landscape has looked like over the years. Kind of starting with, maybe not all the way back to 1965 when Medicare started, but, back in the day, we started with kind of the old school captive model. I mean, that was a lot of what was going on. People represented a carrier that they were employed by. Things were a lot more, say, territorial. You kind of worked your area, and you might be the only agent working with that carrier in that county or district or however they split things up.
Yeah, it's interesting because that was how people got information and knowledge back then. It's only been, 50-ish years. But it's essentially like people would come up to, doors or, maybe, it was a lot of door knocking, a lot of sitting at diners and, paying for an apple pie for someone, or, across the room to try and get business, a lot of business cards, and just a lot of very small territory, like you mentioned, just getting to know your local community. I don't think that part has necessarily changed, but the fact of the matter is that clients looked at agents as the way that they enrolled in Medicare. That was the way that they enrolled. They had to meet with someone. So it was just how they got their options.
Yeah, and I think it's just, that lack of access to information. You're talking about a time when, we didn't have the internet. If you wanted to call an insurance carrier that was based in New York City and you're sitting in Missouri, you're paying long distance charges. Information was just not as accessible as it is today. So that agent was not just a point of service and a point of, actually assisting you in that enrollment process and helping you decide which plan. A lot of times they were the only person that knew what they were talking about when it came to insurance. They were the expert, and there wasn't as much kind of noise and back and forth maybe as we see today. And, you talked a little bit about how agents find clients. It's really funny you mentioned that. I remember several years ago, I forget what I was looking for, but I found this YouTube video that was someone had digitized an old Metropolitan Life prospecting training video from 1945. Wow. And so if you look on YouTube, just search for like old insurance training. It was life insurance, but same difference. And man, some things change, but some things never change. They just stay the same. So a lot of prospecting tips in that video that are the same still things we would still be talking about today, talking about referrals and centers of influence and things like that. I think there are some universal truths to being an agent in terms of what kind of service you can provide, what type of activities can help you promote your business. But looking at, even things like competition. Now, my gosh, you compete with everybody. You're competing with other agents, you're competing, carrier to carrier or with the carrier who is enrolling people directly. You're competing with Medicare.gov that's enrolling people directly. Back then, you were really competing, you and the carrier you were employed by, against the other carriers in the market. The lines were a little more clear in some ways.
Yeah, and I would think that as an agent, you would get your license, you would then go looking for, maybe you found your job first and then went to go find your license, but you would basically be plugged into a system that was already working because it was a carrier. A lot of times they had brick and mortar buildings, they had your territory already mapped out, so you weren't competing with other people at the same company. And some of them even had, marketing campaigns and processes and people that you could already get plugged into. If they moved an agent over to a new territory, for example, you would just step into that territory. So it is kind of interesting to look at, like, that was, if you were an agent, that was what you did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, and, Rachel knows this about me, and she's going to get upset because I'm going on a major tangent, but I collect old insurance memorabilia, and it's a really weird thing that I do. But it's really fascinating looking at kind of how insurance advertising has changed over the years. Rachel's seen this. I've got a life insurance policy from 1863 that, back in those days, like, the number one way to advertise your insurance company was to literally just put on every piece of information, here's how much money we have in the bank to pay claims. You'll see it like, $200,000. I mean, some of these are old companies, so $200,000 was a lot, but $200,000 in cash reserves, $10 million in cash reserves, like, that was the number one form of advertising, was just saying we actually have the money to pay these claims. And then it transitioned to around the turn of the century, where the big thing was, like, you had to have this nice lithograph of your big home office building.
There was always a big building on all of your...
Yeah.
You should have seen his office. It was like a museum for old insurance pieces, but a lot of them had their big buildings on it. You had to show where it was located. And actually, until like maybe 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, that was a huge question people would ask is, where's it located? Where's the home
Where's
office?
the office?
Yeah.
And I think as we have transitioned into more and more, especially Medicare beneficiaries in our industry, being more and more comfortable with technology, I think that just matters so much less to people. And we've seen that reflected in how insurance is marketed. We don't talk so much about the big building, the cash reserves, I mean, there's a lot of carriers that kind of avoid talking about how much money they make.
Yeah, very true.
But they talk a lot about service, a lot about benefits, a lot about ease of access to care. Those are the things that are important to people now. And I think that's a big change in how, not a change in what matters to clients, but just a change in how it's presented.
Mm-hmm. So historical agents, we've gone down memory lane of kind of what that looks like. Eventually, things started shifting and an FMO became a thing. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't what we think about as an FMO right now. And we actually pulled both an agent and a FMO owner, so Dan Mangus and Joanne Ray, quotes from them to talk through what that meant as an agent and as an FMO owner. Dan actually, he worked as an agent prior to working at Senior Marketing Specialist as a vice president. And we basically asked him, what historically did an FMO mean to you? And he said an FMO was necessary to secure a contract with the carrier. And for many years, that was viewed by the agent as the FMO's primary role. And I mean, if you think about it, it was to get a carrier. That's why you picked them. And I don't think there was necessarily any loyalty to FMOs. But I think for the agent perspective, I don't know if there was necessarily any purpose except for getting a contract.
Sure.
For the carrier, we can see that being a huge benefit to working with an FMO. So Joanne Ray even goes into that.
Absolutely. And I think that's, so Joanne, of course, in the early 90s was, approached as part of McNerney Group to help set up one of the first FMOs in the Medicare space. And, said when we were approached by the carrier in the mid-90s, the senior Medicare industry really didn't have that model of distribution. If an agent was going to sell a Medicare product, they were either part of a captive organization or they worked directly with a carrier. And carriers realized that those of us that had smaller regional shops knew everything about our individual markets and geography. And the carriers recognized the importance of letting the experts handle what they're good at. The carrier can handle what they are good at, claims, commissions, legal, etc. But they left some of those other tasks to these newfound FMOs. Mm-hmm. It's really expensive if you're a company based in Pennsylvania to go out and try to recruit individual agents in Utah. But if you've got a partner in Utah that can recruit those agents for you, train them, offer them contracts, help them with their service issues, that's a lot more cost effective. And that's really how the FMO model of distribution was born. It was all about costs. It was about how do we take this regional, local carrier or product and take it nationwide. And the only way for most carriers to do that was by engaging with or helping create some of these FMOs. And similarly, that was really in the Medicare space, kind of the origination of kind of an explosion of independent brokers that offered multiple products to their clients rather than working directly for a carrier.
Right. Yeah, I think you'll see I'm even thinking of history of an FMO. Joanne was talking about, monitoring certifications and having to grade tests and submit them, and also having an enrollment department, because almost every carrier was paper apps at the time, and having to have someone scrub and look at applications and submit them to the carrier, enter them into the carrier portal was part of being an FMO. Yep. Back then. It still is in some parts of that, but it's kind of interesting to see that was a responsibility of an FMO, is to have a network of agents that they could get a new product out to them and then do some of that extra leverage of, the face-to-face stuff with an agent, getting them supplies, getting them certified and submitted, applications being scrubbed, things like that were the necessary parts of an FMO in the very beginning. But we've seen that still continue, but definitely explode into what an FMO is today and all the resources that FMOs have now.
Absolutely. And I think, now moving forward to kind of what does the landscape look like today for agents and for FMOs, a lot of it is just how do you stand out amongst the noise? There's so much information out there. I think it's probably a 10-year-old quote at this point, but so many resources tell you that the average consumer is 60 to 70% of the way through the buying process by the time they actually get to a salesperson. And that's across industries. But I think especially in the world of Medicare, with all the noise, all the advertisement, all the information that's gotten from a number of resources, unfortunately, I think we see, unfortunately and fortunately, I think we see all too often, clients are probably 85 to 90% through the buying process. A lot of times you'll have a client show up saying, I want this plan. That's what my neighbor has, and they love it. And, that can be great if you just want to, take orders and make a little money. But for a lot of agents, they know that to build a long-lasting business, they need to have a little better value proposition than that. So it takes time to do that education and kind of overcome that information overload.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we reached back out to Dan about what does an agent need to bring to the table now, and he said, for an agent to bring value, they need to be a competent advisor helping to clarify all the information people are exposed to and provide prompt, personalized service. So I think that hits the nail on the head of what you were just saying of there's just so much noise, so much information out there. You've got Google, you've got big data suggestions, even on Medicare.gov. My own parents were getting emails basically saying, here are some plans in your area you might like. And it's just kind of interesting that the competition has definitely changed from the agent next door or the carrier next door to literally everything. You've got information overload on carriers, advertising on TVs, on getting mail, people looking things up on Google and may or may not find legit sources, the big data suggestions from the government. There's just so much noise, so much confusion out there that I think Dan hit a good point of clarifying all the information people are exposed to.
Well, and I think because of that, because there's so much info out there, because people are so far along in their buying process, by the time they get to you as an agent, it makes it a lot harder to build value and develop trust. Right. Because if by the time someone gets to you, they're saying, this is the plan I want, I just need you to help me enroll in it. If they are misinformed, if they got bad information, or if there are factors they weren't considering, the first thing you as an agent have to do is tell them they're wrong. And you have to figure out a way to do that tactfully
100%
and efficiently to make sure that they don't end up making a decision they regret. And I think that's a difficult skill for some agents to learn.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier. I can absolutely see why some agents would consider it easier to just take the order. Here's what I want. Great, let's sign you up. But in terms of building trust, getting referrals, having long-term success, I think all of us know that education aspect is so important in making sure those clients see you as more than just an order taker.
Right. And it's easy. I mean, an order taker, that's Google. Like, they can hop on Google and enroll. So what's your value proposition as an agent if that's the purpose? So it's definitely shifted a lot. Something else that Chalen and I were talking about is the barrier to entry is a little bit easier. You can be an agent. You can just, take your test, and then you find carriers directly. Maybe you're finding an FMO. Maybe you're in a captive organization. There's a lot more choices for an agent and a lot more confusion on how they get started. But essentially, you can get started, sit at your kitchen table, and make phone calls to a state, far away from you, and still be an agent versus, we were talking about historically, you usually had a brick and mortar building, you were meeting face to face. It was more of a local agent type environment. And now it's get a license, and once you're ready to sell, we were what do we talk? Maybe 4 to 6 weeks, depending on the state, you could be ready to go.
I'm 100% convinced from the time someone sits down to study for their license to their first app, if they actually want to make this a career, there's no reason they can't write their first app in 45 days.
Yeah. I think
maybe faster than that, but 45 is a pretty, in my opinion, pretty conservative estimate that if someone's serious about making this career, and the big part, of course, is that they have found good support in a good FMO, upline, captive organization, whatever it is. But if they have good support and they're serious about it, there's no reason that you can't go from studying for your license exam to your first app in 45 days or less.
Yeah, and there's no territory in that 45 days either. You could pick up and sell in, as many states as you want. It's just going to be a matter of time, effort, money, whatever you wanted to spend on investing and knowing that. But I think that goes into like all the extra things too. Like, there's so much more technology that an agent now can access too. Like, they can run quotes on a quote engine. They can they can reach out to their FMO to see what products are available and what they recommend to build a portfolio. So there's more information, but at the same time, I think technology can help you sell almost anywhere. You can pick up the phone, that you can do virtual meetings. It's definitely changed a lot.
Listen, I don't know how many people listen to this on YouTube compared to like one of the podcasting platforms, but if you are on YouTube and you ever carried around a paper rate sheet, comment about it, because I used to carry those around and it was a major pain.
Yeah. When I started in the industry, I was helping agents literally verify that their paper rate sheet was still correct, because quote engines were still, and that was actually a selling point to FMOs.
Yeah.
So this was even 12 years ago would be, we're giving you a free quote engine. And we had actually built our own quote engine, but it wasn't always 100% accurate, because sometimes the agent was catching it. So we were always running a quote and then verifying the paper app and all the modal factors and making sure that we had factored household discount in. And oh man, that was a huge part of my job as a marketer in the very beginning, was just running quotes for people, because we didn't have the technology. So it is kind of funny and
I think that technology has made agents' jobs so much easier, because, my gosh, how many times would you run a quote for someone, sign them up for a plan, and then you get that dreaded notice that the premium was insufficient, that they were rated up, or that they were, your rate sheet was wrong, the carrier taking an increase. I mean, that was not uncommon back in the day, because, there was transitions, right? So way back in the day, Dan will tell you about this. He'll talk about being a debit agent. The client writes a check to you as the agent, and you have a deposit account where you take out your commission amount and deposit the rest for the company to take. And those days have kind of gone by the wayside, but that was a super common way to do business now. And of course, now as the agent, you don't handle any of the money except maybe sticking a check in an envelope that's written directly to the carrier. And a lot of carriers don't really like checks anymore anyway.
Yeah.
They'll take them, but they, much prefer EFT.
Yep. So let's jump into the purpose of an agent. So we've talked about all the history, just kind of reminiscing over history and now. And I think Chalen and I were talking, and he wrote a foreword to Talking Medicare, and the very first paragraph he had in there was just like, I said, you have to read this because it's
Yeah.
so good to describe what an agent is going through right now.
Yeah,
I'll turn it over to you to.
Yeah, so we were
into
sitting
that.
there preparing for this episode, and I didn't think about it because it just popped into my head. I just kind of got up and walked out into Rachel's office, and I came back and she said, I figured you'd be back, but I didn't know where you went. And yeah, so I went and grabbed my copy of Talking Medicare from 2022 edition. A couple years ago, Dan Mangus asked if I would write the foreword to this newest edition of Talking Medicare, which is a fantastic resource for anyone in the industry. And I opened it with a quote from one of our top agents and then kind of some commentary. And they said, things just seem to be getting so messy these days. This was the synopsis of the day-to-day struggle seniors face when managing their health care, as described to me by an agent with over a decade of experience in the Medicare market. As someone who spends their days advising, educating, and oftentimes commiserating with agents, I had to agree, things are indeed getting messy these days. Beneficiaries working longer, delaying coverage, changing enrollment preferences, and chronic conditions all add intricacy to the coverage needs of today's Medicare beneficiaries. Within the past few years, we have seen several realized and proposed shifts in Medicare. The rise of the Medicare Advantage plan, experiments with direct contracting, several methods of reducing drug costs, and carriers exploring how to bring value to previously unserved demographics. The constant state of flux can leave beneficiaries and those that seek to serve them on the outside looking in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of agents feel like that sometimes.
Yeah, 100%. I think that is a nice summary of like the industry in general and what an agent's dealing with. And then that goes into like the why an agent is so important, because it is very messy. You brought up people retiring later. There's more options now. We were looking, I think what was the quote? 900 different drug plans I think that was mentioned this year for 2024, different options. And it's like, there are just so many choices out there.
Oh, it's absolutely absurd. I mean, if you look at the numbers from Medicare, like the average Medicare beneficiary, just Medicare Advantage, has like 43 plans to choose from.
Yeah.
And I think most states have an average of 50 plus Medicare supplements available. So you're talking about literally 100 different ways to get your Medicare
And that's
benefits.
not to mention you maybe retiring later and now you're looking at your group insurance.
Sure.
Maybe you have a chronic condition. You're trying to figure out what works best and your drugs are being covered.
Or maybe you have some other conflicting coverage like federal retiree benefits, Indian Health Service, TRICARE, VA. There's a lot of... But because the baby boomer generation that is still aging into Medicare right now was such a large generation, it is such a drastically larger range of experiences with work, with how they've received care, with how they're used to receiving benefits, and the information that they're used to getting. You know, your T65 right now today was 40 years old when Windows 98 came out. If they worked in any kind of professional capacity, they had a good decade or two of their career where they got very used to using computers. It's not, you know, I think a lot of people still have this vision of someone on Medicare as, you know, kind of that greatest generation, World War II era folks that don't do technology, that don't understand, you know, cell phones, much less online enrollments, and that just couldn't be further from the truth. Not that there aren't regional variances, not that there aren't people who still don't have, you know, broadband access and things like that, but the beneficiary of today has evolved as much or more, and I think more, and that's the biggest problem. Beneficiaries have evolved faster than agents have.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely if you're 30 plus years in the industry, change is hard, and our industry has changed so fast. I even joke when we hire a new person, like don't remember anything, just know where to find things, because there is a half-life of about a year and a half in, everything you've learned, half of it's incorrect. It just changes so quickly. And if you're not updating the way that you write policies, if you're not adapting to how your beneficiaries are looking at information, if you're not changing the way you write business, you know, you could potentially get left behind.
Yeah.
So, but we did reach out to, I'm also an agent, and I did reach out to one of my clients just asking like, hey, you used an agent, like, why did you use an agent? Is there reasons that like you appreciated using an agent? And she responded basically that I did ask questions to you about the programs after hearing insurance advertisement making it appear that there were better programs for me than the ones that I had been using. It makes me wonder how many people believe what they hear or see advertisements which could have a significant impact on their insurance coverage and finances. So I think that's a huge point is as an agent, you're also helping clarify the confusion. There's so much out there. I know we've hit on this a little bit with like the history and the change, but they're looking at, there's so many different ways to consume data now that people get enrolled and then see something and may second guess why they enrolled it. So I think a large part of an agent's job is sometimes just going back and reminding people what their options were and why they picked that coverage.
Well, and I think it reminds me of the old adage, the best offense is a good defense. I feel like so many agents would tell you they feel like they're constantly playing defense these days because they're constantly defending the advice they've given someone against these TV commercials or the stuff people get in the mail or the emails or the phone calls. And they're trying to defend their clients against this just onslaught of information, but also trying to defend their own expertise, their own advice that they've given people. And I think that defensive attitude is really common among agents these days. And I don't think it's unwarranted, but you have to be cautious to be defensive without appearing like you don't know what you're doing. And I think it can be really easy to go on the defense in a way that makes you seem offended or upset and not just protective and wanting to educate.
We share this all the time with agents. If an agent is like leaning towards a particular product or against a product, like never to vocalize that to a client because they're hearing all the noise out there, and you never want to appear that like, what if the industry shifts and you're anti one of med subs or Advantage, whatever the direction is. You never want them to like not think to go to you. So like I think you're correct is you have to be very careful when you're talking as an agent, talking to that client to make sure that they are aware of why they selected that plan, that you also offer other options, that you're willing to go other directions. And I think that's another thing is you don't have to know just one product. There's also a lot of information an agent has to know. You can't just like we were talking about being a captive agent for a carrier. Now you're a broker. Most agents now are representing every product out there. They represent multiple industries. Sometimes, maybe Medicare isn't their bread and butter. Maybe they also represent PNC, which has open enrollments at different times. So there's just so much more that an agent has to be aware of. There's different ways to set your company up so that you're not getting confused with all the chaos. But I think that quote in the beginning of your book of just like, it's just messy. There's a lot.
Sure. No, I absolutely agree. And I think one of the biggest things is clients don't always understand not how to mitigate risk, but maybe which ones are worth mitigating.
Yeah.
Because like with most people that have, worked for a living, they've gone out, they've done the best they could. And I think that's the majority of people that we work with. The biggest risk to them has always been seen as their bank account, making sure that stays as far above zero as they can get it. So when you start talking about premiums and out-of-pocket costs and things like that, a lot of times the risk to them is that short-term risk of, well, how does this affect my bank account? I know what's coming in, I know what's going out. And that is a big concern. But it also has to be a concern, what's the impact of not spending that money?
Right.
What's the impact on your ability to access providers? What's the impact on being able to get the care that you need to manage a chronic condition that could even put you in a worse position, things like that. And I think, like you already mentioned, agents need to know so much more than they used to. It's not just, hey, I offer 27 different products and need to know about all of those. The real value that an agent brings to the table over Medicare.gov or over some other enrollment mechanism is the ability of an agent to go above and beyond just the enrollment process. So many agents, not every agent does this, and I'm not trying to say you have to do this to be successful in business, but so many agents find a lot of success, not just in product enrollments, but they help people sign up for Part A and B. They help people apply for low-income subsidy or Medicare savings programs. They help people apply for Medicaid. They help people get step therapy exceptions or formulary exceptions or go through pre-authorizations. It's all this extra all, having good contacts in the community, even for non-insurance needs. Someone has trouble getting around and they need a ride to the doctor. Knowing which community resources to direct them to, or how their Medicare Advantage plan transportation benefit works. Those are the things that agents are looked to more than ever before, even beyond the knowledge of the actual products they offer.
Yeah, and I think that hits a good point of just being more than an enrollment person, like knowing to be a resource to make sure that they understand like the importance of, everything from the provider networks and making sure that they're in the right pharmacy, that they know who, maybe you have like a really weird situation, you happen to know a contact at Social Security's office. Like being an advocate for your client is probably one of the most valuable things that an agent brings, is like not only which is all insurance is literally just mitigating risk. Do you want to buy this insurance so that you don't have to financially service or take care of this risk?
Yep.
So it's, in addition to that, it's being an advocate, it's being an educator, being a resource in the community that adds really true value for an agent.
Well, and you mentioned being an advocate, so I'll read this other great thing that Sue said about you. So again, we got some quotes from some great people, including one of Rachel's clients. A true advocate has the desire to learn about your needs and goals and ensure there are no surprises in your coverage for your current medical needs, as well as those that are unforeseen in your future. And that's obviously a testament to you, of course, but a really, that's what a client thinks of. That's what they want. They want an advocate, someone who can educate and anticipate what may happen and why they should go one direction or another. Not steering, not guiding, but educating and informing on what those options mean down the road.
Right. And I'll read one last quote from her because I think it wraps up really what the true purpose of is an agent. She said, "Since we've met, you have made me not only feel confident in my decisions, but safe with them too." That's what all clients want, to feel confident and safe. And if you can do that as an agent, like, people don't remember what you said, they remember how you made them feel. So if they know that they can call you up if they're concerned, that they have talked with you about all their risk and made a decision because you made them feel confident in that decision, and then you also help them with resources, confident and safe.
Absolutely. And I think, for an agent, that's definitely of paramount importance. But the way an agent gets to the point where they feel like they can do that for their clients is by having a great FMO.
Which will lead into our next.
Practice that one. No, we didn't practice this at all.
So I want to start off with the purpose of an FMO with a quote from Joanne, because I think it takes you nicely into like the why behind it. She says, "A lot obviously in the 30 plus years has changed, but the biggest is how our agents get information, resources, training, and how they approach their clients. Technology has played a big part, but with having one expert to work with, the FMO, they can spend more time doing what they are good at, and which is presenting and talking to their clients."
Absolutely. And I think that's whether you currently get a lot of value from your FMO or not. What I want anyone watching or listening to this to understand is that the value is there. Mm-hmm. You may not be seeing it right now, but it is there. You need to ask for it if you're not seeing it. And there's so much available there. So we talked a lot about this as we were prepping this episode, and I said, there's so many things an FMO should be providing to an agent, in my opinion. The number one thing, in my opinion, that as an FMO we should be doing for our agents is acting as a filter. Not saying that you shouldn't be getting every piece of information that's applicable from your FMO, not saying that they should be withholding or hiding any information or anything like that, but you are ideally very busy. You're helping clients, you're helping people be confident and feel safe, but you still need all this up-to-date information, whether it's carrier changes, whether it's industry changes, whether it's new information about drug programs or something else. It doesn't matter what it is. One of our biggest jobs is to act as a filter and help you decide which things are most important for you to know. Part of that comes from having a good relationship and having an FMO that's willing to kind of tailor your feed, so to speak, of what is important to you And part of that is just having someone, at your FMO that's a good point of contact, that knows how you do business and can share those things as they happen.
I think that goes back to Joanne's comment too, helping you spend more time doing what you're good at, which is presenting and talking to clients. Your gift, your skill set is making sure those clients feel confident and safe in their decisions. And the only way you can do that is to have a person or a group of people, whether it's one FMO or several, funneling the information that's important to you in your regional area, to make sure, and even not even that, but like providing resources like white pages, resources, training. There's so many different directions that you can go by looking at an FMO, but like Chalen said, tailoring the information, because there's tons of information. There's just so much. So if you spent all your day reading everything and trying to figure out what actually was important, then you wouldn't actually be able to get out in front of your clients.
Absolutely. And I think, just some examples of some of the things. Obviously, like the goal here is, the goal for the FMO too, because we succeed when you succeed. Our goal is to make sure that we are a partner in your success. And for every agent, that's going to look a little different, depending on how you like to run your business, what your goals are long term. And quick plug, if you're not setting 20-year goals, you're missing out. If you're not thinking about what your business looks like in 20 years, you're probably setting the wrong 1, 2, and 3-year goals. But off that soapbox.
But that's a good point though too. An FMO should be helping you set that up, especially with your contracts, making sure that you've had those conversations, that you understand the importance of individual versus a corp, that you've thought about transitions, that you've started a nice foundation with a good group of agents and a good group of people, so that you can start thinking 20 years down the road, 20, 100, whatever you want to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're just
leaving your legacy.
We see so many agents nowadays that, are maybe getting ready to retire or something like that. And a simple mistake that, they didn't know better. No one knew better maybe, but a simple mistake 20 years ago makes their retirement so much more complicated. So that's one of the biggest things, is just making sure you've got that partner in success that is keeping you up to date on changes to which carriers are competitive, how to access those carrier materials, any changes to their enrollment processes, network info, how to find the various things that you need to find for your clients. Like it just and sometimes it's really critical basic things like, how do I actually complete an enrollment with this carrier? I've never done it before. And don't ever feel like you can't ask questions like that. Don't feel like there are questions that are too simple or you should know that. Most FMOs like us work with people who are on their first day in business and on their last day in business, and everyone in between.
The full journey.
And they have a lot of questions that can range from simple to incredibly complex. But don't ever feel like, oh, we've probably heard this before. That's the whole point. That's one of the biggest values of an FMO. We work with thousands of agents around the country, and we have heard it before. And that's why we're able to be such an incredible resource. Something that you may run across once in your career is a case we've handled twice this week, because the law of large numbers, a lot of agents, a lot of production, a lot of situations. So having that access to kind of that sum total of experience, being able to condense the experience of thousands of agents and partners into one office that can share that information back out is incredibly valuable.
Yeah, I think it adds value in several different aspects. You brought up the agent value. I would say in addition to that, a lot of carriers are using FMOs to consolidate all of the agent experience and then help them create, plan, and design products for the future, because they're looking at, that collective back and forth. We've also got the government side too. A lot of FMOs, including ourselves, are very involved with industry organizations like NAFA or NABIP, being involved with government changes, legislative changes, and topics in the industry. And I think a lot of that, is important not only for an agent to know that it's something someone is watching what's going on in the government, so that they can focus on helping that client in front of them, but also have a sounding board where they can share information that then goes to the government too.
Absolutely. And I think, among these industry changes, being able to inform agents on what's going on what they can do about it, whether it's local advocacy, submitting comments, attending conferences, whatever it is. But I think also just how do you grow as a business owner? Like I said, we work with folks on their first day in business and folks on their last day in business. And our job as an FMO is to get them there. Well, get them from point A to point B. But some people are starting on point C and need to go to point K. So having the ability to take that combined experience and develop your business in a way that makes sense for you, because not everyone wants to grow in the same way. Making sure that we have resources for the different ways to grow your business and tools to help you make that plan. And, what I always tell folks, I think, my job is to help an agent develop and execute a business plan and then review it and revise it as time goes on. And I think that's one of the biggest things an FMO can do for their agents. And part of that is, supporting you in finding new clients. Now, does that always mean something like co-op or leads or, something like that? No, but it means helping you create sustainable, repeatable systems to find new clients. How are you marketing? How are you getting out in the community? How are you creating buzz for yourself as an agent or agency? And then how are you translating that into apps? Because that's how you grow your business.
I would also say, in addition to that, using systems and processes to save time. So a lot of FMOs are creating or developing different things like CRMs, enrollment platforms, quoting platforms, or even if they haven't designed it or created it, they're paying for it so that you don't have to. So I think there's a lot of benefit too in using FMOs, because there's system and process technology that you could have at your fingertips that maybe you would have had to spend hours, days, months researching, talking to that company, figuring out which one works best for you, versus an FMO hopefully has done a lot of back-end research on that, so that then you can just go, whoop, that looks good, and then go ahead and start working with it too, which will save a lot of time, effort, and it overall give you more data so that you can have more information at your fingertips when you're in front of your client too.
Absolutely. And I think, using those resources is fantastic. And, kind of to wrap up this episode, because I think we've said all we can say, but Dan, of course, when we asked him for some quotes, said it in, 2 minutes what we spent 20 on. But, Dan said, an FMO now needs to be a partner in building and maintaining an agent's success. An FMO should be an advisor to building an appropriate product portfolio, an advocate for the agent to carriers, a source of compliance direction, a provider of enrollment and service tools, a resource for fast answers to questions that arise in the process of working with clients, an ongoing information and education resource, and a back office for running a successful business. And I think really that sums up all of the things you should be looking for in an FMO. There's not any one correct way to provide those resources. It needs to be something that, kind of fits in with how you like to do your business. But I really think there's not a whole lot more to say on this.
Yeah, so thank you so much for watching Medicare Industry Insider.